The hangar was quiet, almost too quiet. Ships hummed softly in the distance, and the smell of hot metal lingered in the air. Most people had gone home, leaving only the night crew and a few stray aliens who moved silently among the cargo crates. Among them, Joran, a human mechanic, was wiping grease off his hands and checking the engines of an old freighter. He liked working at night. The calm made him feel like the galaxy paused just for him. He heard it then, a small, weak cry. At first he thought it was a stray animal, but the sound was different. Softer, frightened, almost pleading. Joran froze. The hangar was supposed to be empty. Whoever, or whatever, made that sound was not meant to be here. He followed the noise to the far corner, near a stack of metal crates. The sound came again. This time he saw it, a tiny dragon no bigger than a human child. Its scales were shiny, but one wing hung limply at its side, blood seeping through the edges. The dragon's eyes were wide with fear. They were not angry, just scared. It trembled, pressing itself against the wall as if trying to disappear. Joran's heart sank. He had seen dragons before, but never so small, never so helpless. Most adults in the starport feared them, and the children, like this one, were often ignored or hidden. No one had taught him how to handle a dragon, but he knew one thing. It was hurt. That was enough. He crouched slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Hey," he whispered. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The dragon flinched at the voice, tilting its head, unsure whether to run or strike. Its small claws scraped the floor, leaving faint scratches. Joran stayed calm. He remembered what his mother had told him long ago: kindness is stronger than fear. He reached into his bag and pulled out a clean cloth and a small container of water. The dragon watched him carefully, every blink, every move. He wet the cloth and pressed it gently to the torn wing. The dragon hissed softly, not in anger but in pain. Joran whispered, "I know it hurts. I'll make it better." For a moment nothing happened. Then, slowly, the dragon allowed him to wrap the wing. Its tiny body shook, but it stayed still. Joran worked carefully, knotting the cloth so it held the wing without squeezing too tight. When he finished, he stepped back. The dragon blinked at him, then sniffed the bandage. Its small head tilted, almost like it was trying to understand the human who had not run away, who had not shouted, who had not heard it. Joran smiled. "There you go. Better?" The dragon made a low, soft sound, almost like a sigh. Relief, maybe. Or trust. He couldn't tell, but it was enough. From somewhere deeper in the hangar, Joran heard more faint cries. He froze again. There was no wind, no machinery making that sound. It was another dragon, or several. Tiny noises, soft and scared, coming from behind crates and shadows. He stood slowly, keeping an eye on the little dragon. "Okay," he said softly. "Let's see who else needs help." As he moved toward the next sound, he noticed something strange. These were not wild dragons attacking or hiding. They were waiting. Waiting for someone who would not hurt them. And somehow he realized he had become that someone. The next dragon appeared slowly from behind a crate. A bit bigger than the first, with a burned patch on its scales. It froze when it saw him, but it did not run. Joran knelt again, reaching into his bag for another cloth. The dragon's eyes were wide, watching carefully, unsure. He gently dabbed at the burned scales, whispering, "I know it hurts. I'm helping." The dragon hissed, but not aggressively. It let him wrap the cloth around the burned area. It flinched once, then relaxed slightly. Another quiet sigh escaped its throat. Joran felt something stir inside him. Something he hadn't expected. Pride. No. Something softer. Hope. The hangar seemed different now. The metal walls and cold floor did not feel so lonely. There was life here. Fragile, small, and frightened life, but life that trusted him. And the more he helped, the more he noticed tiny changes. The dragons did not grow aggressive. They did not flee. They stayed watching, waiting, trusting. He looked at the first dragon again. Its wing was no longer drooping as badly. It stepped closer to him, careful but curious. Joran reached out his hand slowly. The dragon sniffed it, then pressed its small head against his palm. A soft sound came from its throat, a purr maybe, or a sound of gratitude. Joran laughed quietly. "I guess we'll take care of all of you, huh?" From the shadows, more small cries echoed. Some came from crates, some from the far corner, and some from above, clinging to beams or pipes. One by one, dragons began to appear. Tiny claws, shimmering scales, weak wings, and hopeful eyes. Joran did not panic. He simply knelt, cleaned, and bandaged. One dragon, then another, then another. Hours passed, though he did not feel tired. The hangar was filled with quiet noises. The hiss of dragons, the soft slap of cloth against scales, the low hum of engines in the distance. None of the dragons tried to attack. They did not need to. They were safe. They had found someone who would not hurt them. By the time the first light of morning crept into the hangar, the line of small dragons stretched across the floor. Each had a bandaged wing, a soot-stained scale cleaned, or a burn covered. All looked at him with cautious trust. Joran looked back at them, smiling. His hands were sore and his clothes were dirty, but he felt something stronger than exhaustion. He had found his purpose. And he did not yet know how many more would come. The hangar had changed since the night began. Where before there was silence and shadows, now there was life. Dragons of all sizes moved slowly among the crates, their eyes wide and curious but never hostile. Some huddled in corners, others perched on low beams, but all of them watched Joran, the human mechanic who had dared to kneel beside a baby dragon and treat its injured wing. Joran had never worked with dragons before. He had repaired ships, fixed engines, and even patched leaks in oxygen systems. But dragons were different. Their bodies were strong, their scales sharp, their teeth dangerous. Most humans in the starport gave them wide space or avoided them completely. But Joran could not do that. He knelt again beside a small dragon with a cracked horn. The dragon hissed softly at the sound of its own pain. Joran held a clean cloth in his hand and pressed it gently against the cracked horn. The dragon tried to pull away, but Joran's voice was calm. "It's okay. I'm helping. Nothing will hurt you." The small dragon stared at him, its amber eyes measuring, judging, learning. Then, slowly it stopped resisting. Joran wrapped the horn with the cloth, knotting it carefully so it would stay in place without pressing too hard. When he finished, the dragon blinked at him and stepped back, tilting its head. A soft sound escaped from its throat. Joran smiled. "You're safe now," he whispered. He did not notice at first that he was being watched. Shadows moved along the walls, shapes of larger dragons hiding behind crates and beams. Some were young adults, bigger than him, with wings that could carry them high into the sky. They had injuries too, burned scales, small cuts, and bruises from careless landings or collisions with cargo. Most humans would have run. Most humans would have felt fear. But Joran did not step back. He had no reason to fight or prove himself. He only wanted to help. That was enough. He moved toward a dragon with one wing bent awkwardly. Its scales were dark blue, streaked with silver, and one eye watched him warily. Joran knelt a few feet away and spoke softly. "I won't hurt you. Let me help." The dragon flinched, shaking slightly. Its claws scraped the floor, leaving marks in the metal. Joran took a deep breath and slowly reached out his hand. "You're not alone," he said. "No one will hurt you while I'm here." The dragon tilted its head. Curiosity mixed with fear. Finally, it lowered itself to the floor and allowed him to approach. Joran used water and a clean cloth to wipe away dirt and dried blood. Then he carefully wrapped the wing with another piece of cloth. The dragon hissed softly in pain, but it did not run. Joran straightened and looked around. More dragons were emerging. They had heard the quiet voices, the rustle of cloth, the soft whispers. They saw that no one had shouted or moved violently. They saw calm. They saw safety. A small line of dragons formed behind him, waiting patiently. Joran could not help but laugh softly. He had expected maybe a few strays, but now dozens were here. Some were tiny like babies. Others were as tall as a human adult, still recovering from injuries. An older dragon stepped forward. Its scales were dark green with streaks of gold. Its wings were large and one had a tear near the tip. The dragon looked at Joran and Joran looked back. He could feel the weight of its gaze. In most places this dragon could crush him with one flick of its tail. But Joran did not move. He knelt, keeping his eyes calm. "I can help you," he said. "I don't need anything. Just let me help." The dragon studied him. Then, slowly, it lowered its wings so Joran could examine the tear. The human worked carefully, using soft cloth to cover the wound, pressing gently. The dragon hissed softly in protest but did not pull away. When the wrapping was done, the dragon flexed its wing and stepped back. It watched him, almost as if trying to understand what kind of being could act without fear or anger. Joran felt a strange warmth in his chest. It was not pride, not fear, not triumph. It was something simpler: connection. In a galaxy where dragons ruled and humans were seen as weak, he had found a place where kindness could matter more than strength. The night passed slowly, but Joran did not feel tired. He moved from dragon to dragon, helping burns, scrapes, torn scales, and cracked horns. He spoke softly to each one, never raising his voice. Some dragons hissed or shook, testing him, but none attacked. He was careful, gentle, and steady. Outside the hangar was dark. Engines idled softly and distant lights flickered across the walls. Inside, a line of dragons formed, sitting or lying quietly, all waiting their turn. They did not need to speak, their eyes told him everything. They needed help. They trusted him. By the time the first hints of dawn appeared, Joran had treated dozens of dragons. His hands were sore, his clothes smeared with soot and blood, but he felt no exhaustion. Each dragon had left a mark on him just as he had left a mark on them. And then he realized something else. The dragons were not just healed, they were changed. They had learned something about humans. That humans could be calm, kind, and brave. That humans could act without fear, without weapons, without authority, and still be powerful. One of the older dragons, now fully healed, nudged a smaller one toward him. It was a gesture, a sign of trust. Joran knelt and smiled. "We'll take care of each other," he said softly. And as the sun rose over the hangar, spilling golden light across metal floors and glittering scales, Joran understood something he had never thought before. This was not just helping. This was teaching. He was showing dragons, and maybe the galaxy, that courage could be quiet, strength could be gentle, and trust could be earned with simple acts of care. The line of dragons behind him did not move. They stayed, patient, quiet, waiting for the next hand that would help them. Joran knew it would be a long day, but he did not step back. Not now, not ever. Because he had learned something simple but true. Sometimes being human meant standing your ground, not with weapons, not with words, but with your hands, your heart, and your courage. By mid-morning, the hangar was no longer quiet. Shadows danced along the metal walls as sunlight crept through high windows. Engines hummed softly in the distance, and the scent of hot metal mixed with dust and the faint smell of dragon scales. Joran stood in the middle of it all, hands sore and clothes smeared, yet calm. Around him, the dragons moved slowly, quietly, and patiently. It was then that he noticed something extraordinary. A line had formed. It was not neat or perfect, but it stretched from the far corner of the hangar all the way toward him. Dragons of every size, age, and color waited their turn. Some had small injuries, a scrape, a burn, a torn scale. Others bore more serious wounds, bent wings, or cracked horns. All of them watched him with wide, intelligent eyes. Joran's breath caught. He had never seen anything like this. Dragons were not animals to be herded. They were proud, strong, and dangerous. And yet here they were, forming a line, trusting a single human to care for them. He knelt beside a small, blue-scaled dragon whose tail had been scorched. The dragon hissed softly but did not move. Joran pressed a cool cloth to the burned area, murmuring, "I'll make it better. Just trust me." Slowly, carefully he wrapped the tail. The dragon flinched once, then relaxed. It nudged his hand gently with its snout, a gesture of thanks. A murmur of noise came from behind him. Joran turned and saw more dragons moving toward the line. One by one they waited their turn, watching how he worked with others. Some whispered to each other in low hisses, tiny sparks of smoke escaping their nostrils. Others tilted their heads, curious, trying to understand this human who did not act with fear or anger. Joran realized something. He was teaching them without words. Each act of care, each gentle touch, each calm voice showed the dragons something no one had before. Humans could be safe. Humans could be brave without being violent. Humans could help even when they were small and seemingly weak. An older dragon stepped forward next. Its scales were dark green, streaked with gold, and its wings were massive, but one wing drooped awkwardly. The dragon lowered its head to let Joran examine the injury. He worked carefully, cleaning the torn membrane and wrapping it with cloth. The dragon hissed softly at the pain but did not pull away. Instead, it watched him with amber eyes full of quiet surprise. From a distance, some starport workers had begun to gather. They whispered to each other. "Look at that human," one said. "He isn't afraid." Another shook their head. "Why is he helping them instead of running?" Joran did not notice the whispers. He did not look for approval. He only saw the dragons waiting for help, each one trusting him despite their size and power. More dragons arrived. Some had been hidden behind crates, some had flown in from the roof. One young dragon had a broken horn, another had a burned wing. They came in slowly as if testing him, seeing if he would act the way others had, with fear, with violence, or with ignorance. But he did not. He knelt again, working on a small dragon whose wing had been torn by a cargo net. His hands were steady, his voice soft. "It's okay. I've got you." The dragon trembled at first but then relaxed. Its wing was bandaged and it flapped it slowly. Joran smiled. The line kept growing. Soon, it stretched across the hangar floor, dozens of dragons waiting patiently. Joran glanced at them and realized something important. None of these dragons had been forced to line up. They had chosen to wait, to trust, to accept help. The line should not exist. Dragons were proud, independent creatures. But it did. Because he had shown them a simple truth: humans could care. A small dragon nudged a larger one forward, as if encouraging it to join the line. Another dragon hissed softly, and its companion responded with a gentle vibration from its throat. The sounds were quiet, almost musical. Joran did not understand the language, but he felt the meaning: respect, trust, recognition. He worked tirelessly, moving from dragon to dragon. One had a small burn on its snout, another had a torn claw. He cleaned, wrapped, and soothed. With each gesture he saw something remarkable. Dragons were learning from him. Not just healing from him, but understanding him. They watched, remembered, and adapted. The line seemed endless. He felt the weight of it in his arms, in his shoulders, in his mind. Yet he did not step back. He had learned already that fear could not guide him. Anger could not help. Only patience, care, and courage mattered. From a distance, a group of dragon guards approached. They were taller, older, and more dangerous than the ones in line. Their wings spread wide, casting shadows across the hangar. Joran froze for a moment, unsure of what they might do. But they did not attack. They stopped, observing him, watching how he moved and worked. The largest guard, with scales black as night and streaks of silver, stepped closer. It lowered its head and sniffed the air around him. Joran stayed still, breathing calmly. The dragon's eyes, bright with intelligence, studied him. Then, slowly it stepped back. It seemed to recognize something. Joran had not raised his voice, had not struck, had not demanded. He had only helped. And that was enough. The line continued to wait. Dragons of all sizes, all ages, and all injuries remained patient. They had formed a line that no one would have believed possible, stretching across the hangar. And in the middle of it, a single human moved calmly, quietly, tirelessly, tending to each of them. Joran realized then that the line was more than a line. It was a lesson. A story written without words. A proof that courage could be quiet, strength could be gentle, and trust could be earned in simple acts of care. As sunlight spilled across the hangar, shining on scales of green, blue, gold, and silver, Joran smiled softly. He did not know how many more dragons would come, or how many nights it would take to help them all. But he did not step back. He could not. Because in that line, stretching across the floor, waiting patiently, was the beginning of something bigger than fear, bigger than power, bigger than any weapon in the galaxy. It was the beginning of trust. And he was ready. By midday the hangar was alive with movement, but not chaos. Dragons of all sizes waited patiently, watching Joran as he moved from one injured creature to another. Their eyes followed him with curiosity and caution. But there was no fear, no anger, only quiet observation. Something unusual had begun. A line that should not exist had formed, and it had drawn attention beyond what Joran could see. From the far entrance of the hangar, a shadow appeared. Joran glanced up and froze slightly. It was larger than any dragon he had treated so far. Its scales were dark, almost black, with streaks of silver along its wings. Its eyes glowed like molten gold. Every movement radiated authority. This was no ordinary dragon. This was a high-ranking member of the dragon hierarchy, someone whose presence commanded respect, fear, and obedience. The hangar fell almost silent. Even the dragons waiting in line paused, their bodies stiffening. Joran's heart raced for a moment, but he stayed calm. He had learned not to panic, not to flee. Fear was useless here. Patience and care were his only weapons. The dragon stepped closer, its massive wings folding carefully behind it. It sniffed the air and then it spoke, not in words Joran understood, but in a series of low hisses and vibrations. The sound echoed through the hangar, carrying authority and question. Joran did not flinch. Instead, he met the dragon's gaze steadily. "You are not afraid?" A small hiss sounded, almost like a whisper, but heavy with meaning. Joran shook his head slowly. "No," he said in a calm voice. "I am not afraid. I only help those who are hurt." The dragon tilted its head, studying him. It had seen humans before. It had seen them weak, scrambling, frightened, or trying to fight things they could not understand. It had never seen one act like this, alone, patient, gentle, yet fearless. The dragon lowered itself slightly, bringing its massive head closer to Joran's. "Why?" it asked in a hiss that resonated in the floor. "Why do you help them? They could hurt you. They could destroy your ships. They could kill you." Joran looked at the dragon calmly, seeing not a threat but a creature asking a question it had never dared to ask. "Because they are hurt," he said simply. Because I can. Because no one else will. I do not need anything from them. I do not need to fight or prove myself. I just help. The high-ranking dragon blinked slowly. No human had ever spoken like that. No human had ever acted like that. It lowered its head even closer. No human has ever done this before. You do not fear us. You do not demand. You do not control. Why? Joran smiled faintly. I do not see you as a threat. I see you as a creature who needs care. Fear and control do not help anyone. Only understanding does. The dragon made a low, vibrating sound, almost like a hum of disbelief. Around them, the other dragons shifted slightly, watching the interaction. The younger dragons looked at Joran with trust, but also with a new understanding. They were learning from this moment, observing a human who acted without fear, without expectation, simply with care. The high-ranking dragon's golden eyes softened slightly. It had seen countless humans and most were small, weak, or foolish. But this one was different. There was courage here, not in claws or wings, not in fire or size, but in simple, patient action. In small hands, gentle voice, and steady heart. You risked yourself, the dragon said slowly. You are alone. Why do you not step back? Joran knelt beside a small dragon with a torn wing. Because someone has to do it, he said. If I do not help, who will? If someone is hurt, I cannot just walk away. I do not need to be the strongest. I only need to be here. The high-ranking dragon's gaze traveled along the line of dragons waiting patiently. It saw how each creature had learned to trust, how the injured had been soothed, how fear had been replaced with calm. No human had ever commanded such respect without fear, without force, without rank. You are strange, the dragon said finally. Most humans are small. Most humans are weak. Most humans do not survive long among us. Yet you stand here. You do not retreat. You do not fight. You only care. Joran shrugged, smiling faintly. I am human, he said. We do not always need to fight to be strong. Sometimes being strong means standing where you are and helping even if no one else does. The dragon's golden eyes blinked slowly. It made a low, soft hiss, almost like a sigh. Around them, the other dragons seemed to understand something new. They whispered among themselves, a gentle vibration of sound that Joran could not translate, but he felt the meaning: respect, understanding, recognition. For a long moment, silence filled the hangar. Joran continued working, bandaging a small dragon's tail, adjusting a wrap on a young dragon's wing. The high-ranking dragon remained, watching, studying, learning. No one had ever dared to question humans like this. Not openly, not calmly, not with honesty. Finally, the dragon lowered its head and spoke again. You teach without words, it said softly. You show without threat. You act without fear. This is not weakness. It is strength we do not understand. Joran looked up at the dragon, meeting its gaze. Strength is not always about size or fire, he said. Sometimes it is about patience. Sometimes it is about care. Sometimes it is about being here when no one else will. The high-ranking dragon's eyes glowed golden, and it slowly turned its head toward the line of dragons. The young ones blinked at it, then looked at Joran. They had learned from him. They had seen the human who acted without fear or expectation, who moved calmly among them, helping, teaching, and caring. And in that moment, the hangar felt different. It was no longer just a place for ships and cargo. It was a place of trust. A place where humans and dragons could understand one another, if only they chose to see beyond fear. The high-ranking dragon finally straightened, folding its wings carefully. It gave a low, almost imperceptible nod to Joran, a gesture that carried meaning heavier than any words. Respect. Recognition. Acceptance. Joran smiled faintly and turned back to the line. There were still more dragons waiting. Still more injuries to tend. Still more trust to earn. He did not step back. Because he had learned the truth. Sometimes the question no one dares to ask is the one that changes everything. And sometimes the answer is simple. Care, courage, and patience are stronger than fear. Years passed, and the hangar where Joran had first helped the dragon hatchlings was no longer quiet. Ships came and went, engines hummed, and the smell of metal and oil mixed with the faint scent of dragon scales. But even as the hangar grew busy with commerce and travelers, some things remained the same. The dragons who had once lined up for help never forgot the human who had cared for them. Joran had long since moved on from that hangar. He had repaired countless ships, traveled to distant starports, and fixed engines that no one else could. Yet he often thought about that night, about the line of dragons waiting patiently, about the quiet trust in their eyes. He had acted simply, without expectation, and in return he had earned something far greater than he could have imagined. The dragons had grown too. The small hatchlings were now powerful, confident, and respected creatures. Their wings could carry them across entire star systems, their claws could dig into the hardest rock, and their fire could melt metal. Yet despite their strength, they remembered the human who had knelt beside them, bandaging broken wings, cleaning burns, and speaking softly. They remembered someone who saw them not as weapons or rulers, but as beings who needed care. In dragon culture, memory was sacred. They remembered not only events but feelings, intentions, and choices. And the choice Joran had made, the simple act of helping those who could not protect themselves, had left an imprint that would last a lifetime. A young dragon, now tall and strong, walked into a crowded starport where humans worked and traded. Its scales shimmered like sunlight on water, and its wings stretched wide with confidence. Yet when it saw a human mechanic fixing a small ship, it paused. Its amber eyes softened. It remembered hands that had healed, a voice that had comforted, and patience that had never wavered. The dragon approached slowly, careful not to frighten the human. The mechanic looked up, surprised by the dragon's presence but not afraid. There was no need. The dragon's stance was calm, respectful, even gentle. It had learned trust from Joran, and it carried that lesson wherever it went. "Do you remember?" the dragon thought, sending quiet vibrations through the air. Humans could not hear the words, but somehow they felt the meaning. Respect. Gratitude. Recognition. Joran nodded faintly, though the dragon could not understand him fully. He remembered. He remembered the nights, the line of hatchlings, the quiet patience, and the trust they had given him. He had not expected anything in return, yet here it was, proof that a simple act could echo across time and space. The dragons had taught others too. Hatchlings he had bandaged were now leaders, guardians, and explorers. They treated humans not as weak but as allies, friends, and caretakers. Systems once ruled by fear now recognized that humans could be trusted, not because of power but because of character. One human had shown patience, and it had changed the way the galaxy saw all of them. In the hangars, starports, and space lanes the story spread. Not as a legend of war or conquest, but as a quiet truth. Humans could act with courage in small, unseen ways, and that courage could leave a mark stronger than any weapon. Children, human and dragon alike, were taught to remember the choice made by one human who did not look away. Even the high-ranking dragons, the ones who had questioned Joran's courage, now carried the memory of his actions. They would tell young dragons, there was one human who stood calmly among the wounded. He did not fight. He did not demand. He only cared. Remember him and let his patience guide you. Joran never sought recognition. He never asked for thanks. He had acted because it was right, because he could, because someone had to. Yet he saw the results in quiet moments. A dragon stepping aside to let a human pass safely, a hatchling nudging a human out of danger, or the subtle gestures of respect in starports across the galaxy. And sometimes, when he repaired a ship in a lonely hangar, he would hear soft noises in the distance. A hiss, a flap of wings, a quiet vibration. He would smile knowing it was them remembering. Remembering the human who had trusted them, helped them, and never stepped back. The galaxy itself seemed to change in small ways. Humans were no longer seen as weak or insignificant. They were seen as capable of courage, of care, of quiet heroism. Not through weapons or status, but through simple acts that left a lasting impression. Dragons and humans, once wary of each other, began to understand, to trust, to act with respect and patience. And in the memories of those hatchlings, now grown and strong, Joran lived on. Not as a hero in the usual sense, not as a conqueror or warrior, but as the human who had knelt, who had bandaged wings, who had spoken softly, and who had stood his ground with patience and care. The line that had once stretched across a hangar, the line that should not have existed, became a symbol. Not of fear, not of power, but of what could happen when one small being chose to act with courage, kindness, and trust. Joran would never forget that night. And neither would they. Because what the hatchlings remembered was not just a human. It was the proof that even in a vast galaxy filled with fear, danger, and uncertainty, the quiet courage of one human could change everything. One act of care could ripple across time, teaching dragons and humans that trust, patience, and kindness were stronger than any weapon and braver than any battle. And in that memory, Joran found something greater than he had ever imagined. The knowledge that humans could matter not because of strength but because of heart.